What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracey, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? What is up? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit. I'm so excited. We've been just like chatting away, me and Cyndee here. And I'm so excited to get into this conversation. And especially as she started talking about Bob Burg and the Go-Giver and something she has going on. And I'm so excited to get into this story because I don't know anything about it. And so super excited. You know, we're just sitting here talking about the way connections and the way life works. And if you listen to this episode over and over again, you've heard me say it, but if not, and this is your first time hearing it, it's like people are our greatest resources, and it's taking care of relationships. When I started my business 6.5 years ago, I didn't know a good 99% of the people that I'm around. I mean, like my family, some friends and family, but the majority of the people that I'm around now are people that I didn't know 6.5 years ago. And it's really cool to see how it compounds. The relationships compound as you take care of relationships. And so for regular listeners, you may be familiar with Adam San Juan, who was on back last October when he released his book. And Adam is just, again, one of those great stewards of relationships, and that's what the commonalities of a lot of the people on this show, I think, which is why my relationships compound, is because so many people will reach out and connect me with more people. And Adam has connected me to so many awesome people, Cyndee being one of them. And so, Adam, I'll get a phone call or a text message every once in a while from Adam raving about how I got to meet this awesome person. And so me and Cyndee connected. This was probably back end of May. And then again, for regular listeners, that I had spoke at the Entrepreneur Unplugged back at the beginning of June. And so we had talked on the phone, and I'm up doing my presentation at this event. And all of a sudden Cyndee's like, "Oh my God, you're that Jason that I talked to." And so it's just, again, really cool how things come around. It's really cool when you can meet people after talking to them on the phone or doing a Zoom, kind of that we're used to, and then you see them in person. And so that was really cool. And Cyndee has a podcast called Godwink. She also has a couple of networking groups, My Collective Network and then My Christian Network. And I'm super excited to get in and talk about how this all came to be, her story, and all of it. So Cyndee, welcome to Coffee and Grit.
Thank you so much, Jason. Such a pleasure to be on here.
And for those that don't notice, she has amazing style.
Oh, yes, I do. Let it roar.
Let it roar, baby.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. You said you love wearing this shirt because a lot of people ask you, kind of a conversation starter.
Oh, yeah, definitely. My husband probably would say it's one of my favorite shirts now. He's even got his own now.
Yes.
He's on it. But yeah, people just look at the lion. They're like, what is that all about? And oftentimes, because of my Christian Business Network, they're like, is there like a faith-based side to that? And I said, yeah, just to me, I think a lot in yours is with consulting. I think too with your podcast and us both doing podcasts is we're letting ourselves roar and getting on the mic, right? We're absolutely getting people to open up and tell their stories versus people listening to a voice that may tell them they're not worthy or they're not good enough. So let it roar, like get on the mic.
And as I was sitting and I was trying to create a company name, and to me, the lion means so much more than like the Roar Consulting. It means all of that, right? And so we talked about like God winks and things like that. I was sitting on the ledge, and I'd been thinking about starting a business for so long. It was in my head. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I had a lot of fear of how do I go make money? I'm doing well here. But I had this constant thought, and I kept getting these nudges and these pushes, and my voice is loud. Like I've been told my whole life to talk in the 1-foot voice through school, and it's like Samuel L. Jackson. It's just the way that I talk, right?
Me too. Cheerleader voice. It's okay.
And so I was in this networking event in Clarkston. It was a chamber event, and it was a crowded room, and it was super loud. And we were talking. I was in the middle of the room, and the chamber people were trying to get everybody dispersed to sit down because the speaker was about to speak. And I was finishing my conversation, and all of a sudden I saw this elderly gentleman beelining towards me from the other corner of the room. And so this gentleman's coming over, and he gets to my side, and he taps me on the shoulder. And I thought he was going to tell me that my voice was too loud. I needed to quiet down, or I didn't know what, just kind of that assumption. And he turns to me and says, son, your voice is a gift from God, and you need to share it with as many people as possible.
Wow.
As I was sitting and I was like writing down my whys, at the very beginning of starting my business, it's like, what am I going to what are the things that are going to prevent me from turning back no matter how deep it gets? And it's like, that is one of the, I found it the other day in my iPad, just kind of look at it periodically. And that was one of the top things I wrote down is your voice is a gift from God. You got to share it with as many people as possible. And so I think about it, it's that roar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That gives me chills just hearing it. I didn't really realize it myself until people were coming on the podcast, and a lot of them were first timers. And once they were on, it was like, wow, that vote of confidence was settling into them in their story.
Yes.
And some were even empowered to say, I want to start a podcast, or I want to write a book, or I want to start a blog. Like they were all really hearing a call on their life to start something to voice themselves, and just be a positive voice out there. So little things we don't realize of starting something. Like I didn't think starting a podcast was inspiring others to have a voice.
Yeah.
And now I see even bigger purposes.
That's my favorite part, is seeing that on the other end, because we're people, and 80% of our thoughts are negative and the things that we're not, right? And and a lot of times, and you can get better and correct that, right? But for the most part, people walk around in their head with the things that they're not and the things they got to get better at. Yep. And they don't feel like they have a story at that event, right? At the Unplugged event. That was one of the things
someone
I did
even
in the
said
afternoon.
it, right? To you. They were like, I don't know if I have a story.
Yeah. That was the question. She was like, what if I don't have a story? And it was like, I haven't met anybody yet that doesn't have a story. And it's usually those people that say, what if I don't have a story, that have something in depth? And then she went on and told a story that made Gracie cry, like it brought tears to her eyes. And we're talking about like doing Botox, so it's like something like that.
Right.
And so it's really cool to see in their eyes how that flips.
And I remember when you had offered to do these short videos for the people that we were in the audience, and that individual actually came to me later, and she was almost like she was shook up with inspiration. She's like, I do have a story. She's like, that was the most amazing exercise for me to explore that there's something in there.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's something I want to do at more events, because that was a lot of fun. And then going back, and I created each person a clip and sent it to them.
That's so good.
And then they get to watch it back, right?
Oh yeah. You made a huge impact on each of those people's lives that day.
Thanks. I felt it. And, it's one of those things, like sometimes I have hard taking a compliment, but I felt it. And I loved having Gracie there too, because I think between us, we were able to really kind of mix it and dig, but it was awesome.
Husband and wife tag teaming it. There's nothing better than that.
There is nothing better. There's nothing better. I love it. And she was very reluctant for a while to come to events with me, but like the Serious Net Breakfast, she killed it. And
yes. Yeah. It's kind of funny in a marriage how like people can be so drastically different, but designed for a purpose.
Yeah.
My husband, he's an introvert, and I'm opposite of that, extrovert. But when you come together, the power of it, oh my gosh, each of you guys have gifts that can be used in furthering the kingdom. It's awesome.
5,000%. Yeah. So how'd you get here? Like I was going to say, how'd you meet your husband? How'd you get to start your business? Like all the questions came at once. So
where do I start? Okay. I guess I'll start with the husband part. So Spencer, my husband of 25 years, we met at church. So, we were actually attending Mount Zion, which is out in Clarkston, which you're probably pretty familiar with the Clarkston area. And I would come drive from Macomb area all the way out to Clarkston, and he was doing the same, driving, I think, from Ferndale at the time. But he was actually friends with my brother, and he must not know my brother well enough, because I don't know why he assumed this, but he thought we were dating. I'm like, I am not dating him. So he's like, hey, is she available? So you're not dating her? He's like, no, that's my sister. And he's like, oh, well, you guys always come together. He's like, well, we're driving from Macomb. So yeah, we do drive together. But yeah, he says, so that means she's up for grabs? And he's like, is that a question? Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, we went from, I had taken I was almost to the year mark of devout time to the Lord because I had been in so many relationships. I was pretty broken as a woman at that time. So he actually came into my life right at the exact right time. I was maybe a month away from having 12 months of just dedicated to finding out who I really was and not being dependent upon, relationships in order to have, to be whole.
Yeah.
So when he found that out, he says, well, when's that end? Because I'm not going to be the one that disrupts that. I'm just going to wait on that. So I says, yeah, it's, about a month or so away. And we never went on a date, we waited. And then he ended up being my husband 10 months after dating.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. So you did that time?
Mm-hmm. I dedicated that whole year to say, God, fix me. I'm a mess. I feel like I'm dependent upon a guy in order to feel like I was worthy, that I was whole. And we all know how relationships go. There's brokenness that happens. And I just knew that I needed God. I knew that I needed him to heal the brokenness. And you don't want to go into relationships with a ton of baggage. And so, not that I didn't have any, because my husband, I'm sure if he was on the podcast right now, I'd be like, she still has something that she carry with her. But
because we're human, you don't just all of a sudden heal everything.
Yeah. But I just think that there's so many women out there and even men where it's they're so dependent upon a
Absolutely.
relationship that they lose who they are in the process. And God's like, let me heal that because I want you to see the power that I can do, that only I could do, to restore you. So yeah, I was, that year was well worth it. I remember even dancing at my wedding to a song by Rebecca St. James, and it was Wait for Me as I Wait for You.
Ooh.
And it was, I think at the time, isn't she they just did a movie with Rebecca St. James' family. But she was waiting on her husband, and said, hey, I pray he's out there. I know he's out there. God has someone for me. And, she's going to wait until he comes. And that was Spencer.
That's amazing for him to be like, hey, I'm not going to interrupt this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Forever changing. So.
That's got to speak volumes. And I guess what's in your head at that point?
Yeah, it got me where I needed to be, and also to encourage other women that I can always sense the brokenness too in women when they're even high school. Oh my gosh, the girls that, at my church, they're in high school. It's I can see that you're dependent on that. And it's so supernatural how the Lord can heal it and how he has someone in store for you. But if you push your own way the whole time, how's he going to even show the miraculous work that he, has in mind? So I really hope the youth nowadays really lean into a godly relationship and pursuing the relationship with God, because then he can do that work even in the person he has for you. So that when you come together, like you and your wife, Tracey, do, it's you're a powerhouse now.
Yeah.
He works through the both of you for such big things. So
that's amazing. So the year ends. This is the first call. How does that work out?
He asked me yesterday, he's like, what was our first date? I'm like, I don't actually remember. I just remember our first kiss. You said you tasted cherry chapstick. That's all I remember. But yeah, it was just he was my best friend. In our dating relationship, my brother even said, he goes, Spencer's not your typical guy. You always dated jocks. And he's like, I'm a little surprised that, you're dating Spencer. And I'm like, I can't stop laughing when I'm with him. I love the fact I can talk God with him. And I can't, every minute I wasn't around him. It was like a best friend relationship that flourished into the romantic side. And yeah, it's nice coming into it on actually getting to know each other and not it first being like an intimate sort of thing. Because there's so many people like in the world that they jump right into the intimacy side of things. Oh, they're, super attractive and man, like the physical part is the first thing that they jump into. But with Spencer, it was like, no, he's like my best friend. He makes me laugh all the time. He understands me. We like the same things. And I wasn't unequally yoked because I dated guys that weren't devoted Christians. Like they would say they believe, but I couldn't really dive into a deep conversation about God. Yeah. And once I entered into that with Spencer, I was like, this is heaven. Like I can actually talk about God stuff, and we love Christian music, and we just share a lot of the same interests.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I'm glad I asked that question because I never usually ask how'd you meet your spouse questions. So that's really, that was like a
big promotion for Spencer Sparre. Yeah, for sure.
So how did you start the networking groups? What's kind of your background in, how did you start your businesses, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, because I came from not knowing how to network, I prominently, most of my career was spent working in HR at Walgreens. I started working as a cashier since I was 16 at Walgreens, working all the way through to I was like 36 years old, working at a regional level. And this is going to tie into what I say in a moment, but because I was in HR, I was specifically training and development, and I was in workforce staffing. So I help create strategies behind training and development and also strategies on recruiting. Well, I started learning about financial services, which while I was working full-time for Walgreens, and I loved the education of it. And I left into the world of insurance and financial services immediately out of Walgreens. And it forces you to have to network. You got to get out there and network. I didn't know what Chamber of Commerce was. I didn't know what BNI was. So I got into it. A few years go by, and I'm like, I really like this. In the beginning, I was scared because I'm like, what's an elevator pitch? Well, I don't have a business card, like all the basic foundational pieces. But I'm like, I really like connecting people. Like I like to see just it's almost like you feeling like a matchmaker, right? But on a business sense.
Yep.
Well, I was in a Chamber of Commerce. I would go to every ribbon cutting. I would go to every event opportunity. And because I was an insurance professional, it was hard to find a group. And the director of the chamber, I would come to the ambassador meetings, and we were just talking one day, and they were like, I says, I'd love to be in a group, but the seat's taken in every single group. I can't even get my own group. They said, well, why don't you start your own group? And I'm like, and they all had this serious look. There's like 12 of us, and they're like, we're serious. And I'm like me? And they're like, you are constantly connecting people. You have great sense of branding. You come to all the events. And the director was like, I agree. Like, I think you would be excellent to start a group. Now, mind you, the directors start a group for the chamber.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, I was thinking grassroots, start a group, you know? And I was part of a BNI as well, which was hard to get into a BNI group actually back then. I was with a company that didn't have the best name out there, more because they were known for recruiting people. I didn't do that per se. I was more focused on the financial services, but it was dang hard to get even into a BNI group.
They wouldn't want you in there. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, man, why don't they want me? They says, we really like you. It's just we're a little worried about the company you work for. So I was like, I get all this resistance, and I just felt the Lord was like, start your own group. So I started that at COVID, right when COVID broke out, which is craziness. Like,
did you know, or did you start before that, or
right before it happened?
Right before it, yeah.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
But it was actually God's perfect timing.
Yeah.
So I had, leading back to where I said I was an HR professional doing training and development, part of that was that I ran virtual meetings using, I think it was Genesis, I can't remember which WebEx that we used back then, for district managers and pharmacy supervisors. So I was used to facilitating virtual meetings. So we were meeting in person before COVID officially broke out, and we were polling about 15 people at the time, and we called it The Collective. And so I remember specifically an individual that actually ended up starting a More Women, if you look that up. She told me, this is hot and people are liking this group you started. You should launch more chapters. And I'm like, once again, unworthy was the programming in my head.
Yep.
And she's like, I'm serious. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just see this one thrive. And so we had to go virtual because of COVID, and we had 35 people in it. It just, people were synergizing, authentically coming together, connecting one another. Yeah. It was just amazing synergy.
It's a good sized group that's with good synergy.
Yeah. And people's cameras were on, Jason. Like, this wasn't like people showed up to the Zoom meeting and their cameras off and they're eating a piece of pizza and responding to emails. Everyone's cameras were on, and we were doing breakout group rooms and all these things. And so, and I remember back then seeing CirrusNet, and I was like, they are killing it. Who is this company? And I remember following you guys for a bit, and I'm like, I guess you can network online. And so after we launched that group, I continued to be a financial advisor, had my securities licenses, my insurance licenses, and I felt like it was a square peg in a round hole. I'm like, I know this is like, ooh, you can make great money in this, right? You can help a lot of people, educate them in finance. But I still felt like I was meant to be more of a connector. So I told my husband, I says, I've been praying about it, and I really want to do this full time. And there's no promises that it's going to be good money, like right out the gate. But I really feel that the Lord has gifted me in this area, and I really want to do it. And I worked really hard for those licenses. I know, because my husband was there for me through that journey. But he's like, Cyndee, if the Lord spoke something to you, who am I to tell you no? So I birthed in 2022 my collective network. And then 30 days later, made the sister network, so my Christian business network, and got to see little peeks behind the curtain where when I would gather them both companies together to network, the secular company and the Christian company, I started getting people coming back to me saying, hey, I'm getting baptized. I was like, you weren't a believer. I know you weren't in the past. Like, tell me your story. Well, Cyndee, I fell in love with a person you introduced me to through my Christian business network. And I loved the character I was seeing in that individual. And we became really close friends. And it led me to the Lord. I'm like, what? This is it. Like, I got to hear about one of the people, through relationships, find God in the process. And I said, like, did you feel like it was pushy with the relationship? Like, were they preaching scripture on you or something? She goes, never. It was that I fell in love with the individual and how they represented themselves and what they stood for. And they were more about the universe in the past, But to me, I love everyone the same. Yep. I'm not going to I'm not going to not be friends with somebody because we have different beliefs, But it was cool that they came back to me to say that. And it actually ended up being a mutual friend of Adam San Juan and I.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I was like, this is so cool to see this come together.
That is so, so cool. You shared that story with me a few weeks ago when we had a conversation. And I actually, when I had Pastor Matt Parks on a few weeks ago, I had brought that story up and just talking about when you be a certain way, when you're a certain way, it will draw people in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the light. It's an attraction of the light that you give off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's such an incredible story.
Yeah.
It's also incredible how, again, I never asked the question about how do you meet your spouse, especially the first question out of the gate, and how that led in, like, what a perfect story, and how that wrapped into like Spencer saying, if you got a sign, if you had the sign from God, then you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you imagine if I didn't take the year off, didn't meet Spencer, married a non-believer, and then tried to leave my financial advising business? Right? They'd be like,
because God told you?
Yeah. Right. So,
you're crazy.
Yeah, you definitely cray. Let's go after the money. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. Then that I love that story again, because just the impact that you're creating, without even really purposely trying to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I think when someone has such a deep why and they really realize their God-given gifts, no money, no material thing of this world is going to detour you. And this all stemmed back, all the way back to Walgreens leaving. I look back and I remember being in the car and people were like, you're crazy. You have a regional position. We had 270 some stores. And they're like, you are nuts to leave this great job, this salary job, this safe job. But I knew God had a calling on me. Did I know it would turn into networking? No, like in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to be the best financial professional out there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But every step you take in your walk and your journey, you learn things.
Yes.
Like God shows you and teaches you things. Like I could not launch, events and groups and development workshops had I not worked in HR for doing training and development workshops. Like those were the stepping stones that God was like, you need to go through this so that you'll be prepared for what I have planned in the future. So,
have you read The Alchemist?
No.
Nobody's read this book, and I love it. I ask this question quite a bit because there's so many stories that remind me of the book The Alchemist, which I read within the last year. And it's this exactly. It's this shepherd boy has this reoccurring dream that his fortunes and these fortunes beyond his wildest dreams lie in like Egypt, or he had to go this and he kept having this dream, but he was very content just being a shepherd, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but one day he meets this guy, which was God, in this plaza, and they're like, and he's telling him his future, and he's like, it makes it undeniable this boy has to go in search for his not, it isn't wealth, but like his
his why?
There's a word for it, they call it, and I can't remember what it was. But anyways, your purpose is basically what it is. And you follow this boy through the story, and he does these linear things, right? He goes down and he starts selling these things in this shop, and essentially all those things gave him experiences or led him to the path of where he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he got the treasure map and said, here you go.
Right.
He had to go and like experience hardships. He got experience and knowledge and things that all came back at the very end, through his journey that empowered him to ultimately achieve his purpose.
How humbling it is to go through it. And I'll be totally honest, I went through a season of wilderness in the beginning because you have to build your brand and your credibility. I mean, we're 2 years in and we're just now entering into seeing like, oh, people know of the, my collective now or my Christian. But I went through like a summer where I was door dashing. And I'm like, I mean, it humbled me so deep down in my heart because I'm like, I was an HR professional for Walgreens making great salary. And, you know, I was a financial advisor with licenses. Like, but God, I never heard him more clearly when I was in the car door dashing, where he would talk to me the whole time. And he would just get deep into my heart and say, you are worthy. But I need you to hear me very clearly for me to be able to guide you in what you're about to enter into. So I think for anyone that listens to this, I really want them to understand that you may have to be humbled down to, hey, my hands are in the air and I'm giving all my trust and faith into what you're doing here. But you'll find him in the process of it. And it's amazing because then you're prepared as you walk through it. You're going to lean in more to the Lord guiding your steps and believing that even if you don't know why you're going through what you're going through in the moment, that God's got your back. And he's, what is it, Jeremiah 29:11 or something? I'm not good with naming scripture, but for I know the plans I have for you to give you a purpose or a plan for you, I think is something that really anchors in for me.
So incredible. Because again, one, it's tuning in and listening to the voice. And I think it's probably your preparation that you've had throughout your life, that year even, that allows you to be able to tune in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I've had to go through enough of the mountains and the valleys to have to tune in. And now I'm actually going through, interestingly enough, because I'm walking in God's purpose, I'm getting a lot more, I notice it, spiritual warfare. And I'm like, dang, what is going on? But it's so apparent and vivid to me because it's like back to back that I can easily put on the armor of God and those arrows aren't penetrating because I'm like, you are so visible, enemy, right now. Like you're doing all this at once. If you were smart, you would have slowed it up a little bit. But I'm like, I just keep on reading. I was with Marie Orzel from Intelligent Office yesterday, and I was telling her we just recorded an episode yesterday with Katie, and she talked about spiritual warfare. And Marie, that day yesterday after we got together and talked about it a little bit, because I told her, I said, he's telling me to armor up. I says, because it keeps coming. Those arrows keep coming. She went home and read her evening devotional. And what do you think the topic was?
No way.
It says September 3rd, spiritual warfare. And she sent it to me as a text message. And she said, armor up, girl. I'm like, yeah. I know some people get like uneasy when I say spiritual warfare. This isn't like, oh, it's scary. It's just there's things that like we don't see. It's the unseen that you don't realize. Those thoughts in your head, those negative thoughts, oftentimes it's just the enemy attacking you. You know, trying, because what did Katie say? The thief does not rob an empty house. And when there is a purpose for your life, when that older gentleman came up to you and said, your voice is a gift from God, right?
Yeah.
The enemy's like, no, I can't. I got to discourage Jason from feeling like he should be using his voice, because I know what's going to happen is it's going to shake a lot of people to turn their head in the direction that I don't want them to go in that direction.
Yep.
So
yeah. I feel that. And I feel as again, your life gets more and more purpose, that there are so many things that come at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get through it all, but know that it's God who's going to bring you through it, not within just your own strength. And I think so many times, I know me personally, I make plans and I'm like, I'm going to make a way. And oftentimes he has to kind of humble me down and say, how's my glory going to show through if this was all of Cyndee's plans were made perfect? So it's a learning process. Still going through it because I'm a planner. I don't know about you, but I'm like, this is my plan. This is my goal. And he's like, some of those. Yeah. Some of those. So. Yeah.
See, I'm not the planner. I'm I just run 1,000 miles a minute and build things as I go. And it's like learning to slow down because if you don't slow down and listen, you start building the wrong things.
Yeah. You don't even realize it until you're like a mile down the road. Are you a visionary?
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah. Do you
that's
do
awesome.
the Colby thing or whatever?
Yeah.
I'm a 8 on the quick start.
Yeah. I didn't realize this until recently that I was in the visionary space. I took a assessment. We used to teach actually the DISC assessment at Walgreens to management. And I was told there's a spiritual gifts assessment. And I was like, well, what's that? And I remember once I took it about a week ago, I was like, I'm the worst Christian ever. Like, because how it was phrased. And they tell you ahead of time, like, don't like compare yourself to other people or have low scores and think you're a bad person. You have specific gifts, like spiritual gifts, which I learned later. But a lot of people can see from the outside and they're like, well, I think you're leadership and I think you are very organized. And I said, actually, I score really low in those areas. And they're like, really? And I said, yeah, I flex it because I'm a solopreneur and I have no choice but to be organized and flex that muscle.
Yeah.
I have no choice but to lead from the front. Although now, not that I don't have leadership skill sets, but my natural tendency is more on like throwing spaghetti at the wall like a visionary and seeing what sticks, So we just started, we're getting ready to launch doing these assessments through the Christian network because we have people that want to plug in and lead and, be a part and they want to know how to help. So I said, I would rather people take a spiritual gifts assessment along with the DISC assessment so that we put people in places and roles that are what they're passionate about and what God has given them as a gift. We want them to run with their gifts. So it's work in progress, but we have, I think we've had like 7 people randomly email in and they're like, hey, I feel led to get plugged in. I'm just being obedient to God's calling right now. So I'm reaching out. Do you need help in any areas? I'm like,
wow.
Okay, this has never happened in 2 years, but we prayed for it. So this is good.
Dang, that's awesome. They're just like, I got told to call you.
Yes. Got a tool.
And then how can you turn down that call? That's the best cold calling technique ever. Like,
right? I know.
God told me to call you.
I know. I'm like, what in
I didn't
the world?
want to.
Yeah.
God would not leave me alone.
You're like, I don't want to be struck down if I don't respond to this. Yeah. But it's really cool just to kind of see him work because he likes to be a part of it too. God's like, hey, let me play in the space too. I want you to see how I'm working. And I just remember I was praying for men in leadership because we prominently have quite a bit of women. And I'm like, I'm not putting down having women in, but I wanted that diversity, because there's a lot of women focused networking groups and things like that out there.
Yep.
And I'm not kidding you. I think we had like 4 or 5 emails in that week that I prayed it of randomly men reaching out and saying, hey, do you need any help in any certain areas? I'm like, this is so supernatural.
That makes decision making a lot easier, right?
I know.
When you get the signs, the legit things that you can't turn away from.
Yeah. I'm like, whew, that's some peace for me to put my head down at night. Because in networking groups, you know what it's like. Like,
oh yeah,
you put someone in a leadership role, and you're like, okay, are they dependable? Are they committed? Are they invested? It's nerve-wracking because it's not, you never want to put someone in a position where you need to transition them,
Yep.
Out of that. So
how does that look? How do your groups look, and you have people that run them?
Yeah. So great question. On the Christian side, they all have a leader in place.
Okay.
On the collective side, it's Cyndee Sparre. And that is not what I intend it to be. It's just how it is. I don't know if the Lord's really having me prep the Christian side to make it a rinse and repeat on the collective side. But yeah, we have on the collective side synergy circles. So I just started in that direction over the summer because I felt like, how is our networking organization going to differentiate and bridge the gap in networking of things that you don't see as prominently out there? And it was, to me, the buzzword was synergy circles. So, say I'm speaking with you and saying, hey, Jason, who would be your top networking referral partner industries, the people that, you get the most coming in from? What are those industries? And I started with financial people, actually. And they're like estate planners, CPAs, accountants, insurance professionals, mortgage lenders. And I'm like, why wouldn't we create something, even if it was once a month, where these people could strategically get together with those industries? And it's almost like a hub for dating business.
Yeah.
So we don't all exactly mesh. Like if you go to a closed networking group, you may not mesh with the mortgage lender as the financial advisor in the group.
Yep.
Why force that relationship? And I'm not saying leave your closed networking group by any means. I'm saying there's benefits to all these different buckets because there could be people in that group that aren't synergy necessarily, but you've had referrals and you've referred them. But I thought, man, synergy circles would be something to bridge the gap. So we started a health and wellness one, a financial one, and a solopreneur. We got 3 groups that started over the summer. And so I am dating the people that are attending, whether they know it or not. You know how it is. You kind of just observe, does this person show up every month? Are they proactively setting up one-to-ones with people that are coming? Are they asking if there's anything they can do? Are they sharing anything on social media? So there's just little pieces where I'm just observing, the behaviors in effort to put the right leaders in place so that we can continue launching more synergy circles down the line.
That is so cool. Again, putting people in those relationships where it's not forced, but they can date.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unheard of to do as much open style groups like these are synergy circles. So the culture there is collaboration over competition. Because if you come in and you're like, I'm going to win all the CPAs in the group as the financial advisor.
Yep.
We're not the group for you.
Yep.
This is genuinely identify who you really mesh with. Ooh, what was that?
I know, a little rumble. Did we have an earthquake? What happened here?
What's happening?
For those that don't know, the whole studio just rumbled. I don't know.
Yeah.
A train went by. I don't know what happened. There's not a train track nearby. I don't know.
We're shaking things up.
I know. There's the sign.
I know. Is anyone still here? Are we the only ones left? Yeah, so that was kind of on my collective side, is developing real relationships and using how I talked about being a connector, just gathering all of these people together so that they can really effectively use their time and identify relationships they want to continue growing. And then our Christian ones, we have 5 groups now. there's a Clarkston, there's Deckerville and the Sticks of Michigan up in the Thumb.
Yeah.
Clinton Township, Shelby Township, and they meet once a month. So it's nice because they open up in prayer. They have a devotional out of the Bible that they go through. And then the networking side with business. It's kind of like that. You don't have to be on eggshells through the Christian network to come in and be like, man, I'm really struggling, whether it's personally or in my business, and people giving you Christ-like advice, that they used in their business, to encourage you, motivate you.
So there's more open and vulnerability.
Yeah. We end up finding ourselves using a good amount of the time on the devotional because it gets into just some good heated discussion, on the topic at hand. So it's a great way to, our whole focus is how are we discipling people in business? Because in the business world, it is challenging, right? You may work for a company and you're networking and you've got to meet certain numbers. And with those stressors, we want you to be able to come in and feel like almost like you had therapy in that hour, to be encouraged in your business and not hear that opposite voice telling you, oh man, you better close some business because you're in trouble or you're not worthy, you're not good enough. Like, we're going to make sure we fill your cup. So you leave feeling like, yeah, I'm on fire. I can do this. Yes.
That's incredible. I love that culture.
Yeah.
What's it like if you can sit from the top and see all this happening?
Tearjerker. We had a meeting in the Shelby Township group recently, and a good one of my core leaders, Denise McKibben, leads the group, and she asked the group if they had any testimonials of their experience thus far with my Christian Business Network. And it's nice to be able to sit and listen and not speak, which is very rare for me. But I was just taking in their perspective on things, and I'm so glad I never gave up, through the grind. Because in 2 years, there was ups and downs, and you're a solopreneur, but yet you're not. Like, I've had amazing people, that had business owners that encouraged me, along the way. Just hearing people say what it did for them makes me feel like I'm filling my cup of, it was worth it. It was worth it. And when I went to your SiriusNet breakfast, which I didn't know it was the SiriusNet breakfast, I was just like, oh, I'm meeting Jason, Tracey, Adam San Juan. It told me to come to this. And I come in and see this room of 150 people and didn't really know anyone because I don't live near Livingston County.
Yeah.
And I look in this room and it's a little intimidating for the networker because I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But I'm like, ooh.
There's so many people.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't even know where to sit. I'm like, whatever. I don't know anybody, so I'm just going to pick a table. But I sit down and I did not realize that Adam San Juan was at my table because he looked at me across the table and he's like, Cyndee? And I said, hey. And he's like, did you even see me sitting here? I said, nope. I saw an empty chair and I asked the gentleman if it was open and he said yes. And then when I sat down, I looked and saw your face. And he's like, well, guess what? You just got your God wink. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh, you're about to find out. I'm like, okay. So Steve kicks off the meeting and he does an activity and he tells everybody to stand up who is a member or leads a group. And I see all these people, different people stand up that are members or leaders. And he says, sit down if you've, been with SiriusNet for this long. Sit down, gets all the way to the end of whoever's like the OG. And I look up to the man who told me the chair seat was open, and he's the last man standing, Doug.
Yep.
Who you talked about your story with me prior to that event. And I was like, what in the world? And I look across and Adam's like, wink, wink. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, I ain't kidding you. He's like, you just randomly picked the perfect seat because it was your seat. I'm like, this is crazy. So Doug and I have been talking ever since.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
But the culture of it, I was like, I never got to just sit and embrace such a culture of like positivity, and everyone got a chance to give a 30-second pitch. Then 150 people. I was like, this is going to be interesting. I'd like to see how Steve pulls this off. And he did it perfectionately. It was amazing. So he's going around, and I hear these people, some of these people, when it says you could give a quote, like the guide says, when you do your 30-second, you could like give a quote. And these people were quoting scripture.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sorry, is this a Christian networking group event? And Doug then tells me, oh yeah, I have a group at the congregation in Detroit. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, what do you do? I'm like, oh my God. This is crazy. From Adam to you, Jason, to Doug, to Steve. I'm like, what is going on here? But God was like, I want you to see that SiriusNet doesn't shame a Christian for saying a Bible scripture.
Yeah.
Like, you're not shamed here. Everyone is welcome. Everyone supports each other. Just hearing how they support one another, I was just flabbergasted at how well all the people in this community are knit together.
It I love the SiriusNet group because of that, and I've talked about it a lot on this show. And Steve, I'm sure, is listening right now with a smile on his face as he's but it is that culture and the vulnerability. And so I'm in the Wednesday 10 a.m. group, and if you're at the event, you know who we are.
Oh yeah,
like we're all like, but it's been such a family. It literally is like we get vulnerable, and it's the relationship building outside of that weekly meeting.
Yeah, it's so important.
It's the getting together, and yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah. I came back from that feeling so inspired. I was driving on my way to meet with my pastor, actually, to interview him and the kids ministry director on how do you build teams off of volunteers, because that's how churches are. They're mostly volunteers. And as I was on my way headed there, I remembered a certain scripture that talked about God says there's a bunch of sheep, right? But there's only one shepherd, which is Jesus. There's one shepherd. And he said, I have sheep here, but there's more sheep. Like I have one fold here, but there's more. And my head initially, when I read this weeks prior to that, was, oh yeah, you want me to bring together the leaders that come from my Christian and my collective and bring them together as one fold, as one sheep. But he's like, oh no. God's like, sister, it's much bigger than that. You're going to bring together all the different business networking organizations. And I'm like, huh? He's like, yeah. SiriusNet, Forward, CBRT, Compass. There's so many networking organization opportunities out there. And what was odd is none of them overlapped geographically. So I looked and I'm like, no one's in Livingston County, but SiriusNet. Nobody's in I think Port Huron is where Compass is at, and maybe in Wayne. I'm like, well, none of us overlap. Prominently CBRT is like Oakland County, which is a Christian business roundtable.
Okay.
So I was like, you're puzzling us together. So it's like, no matter what your background is, I see that God is building up a support system across. And when I'm over in Macomb County and I run into someone from Howell, I've already started. I'm like, have you heard of SiriusNet? And they're like, no. I'm like, have you not heard of them? You're in Howell. And they're like, I haven't. What is it? I'm like, I'll send you the link right now.
Yeah.
So it's like having that open mindset of meet these people where they are and tell them where their resources are.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
your community is amazing. Like, I'm like, he's got like mixtures of Christians and non-Christians in there. You know, this is awesome.
It is. That's really, really cool. And it's serving people because if that's in their area, that helps them.
Yes. Serve the person, not yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And it comes back around, you know? I've said for years, and like my motto, and when I'd onboard salespeople, like bring them in, they'd sit in our company, they'd sit with me for a day, and I'd tell the story of the company and where we've been, where we're going, and what their place in that is, like how, and then what that means for them ultimately, and understanding where they want to go in life. So it'd be understanding who they were and where it kind of pictures in. But I'd always talk about, like, from a sales standpoint, it's like going out and doing good things for people. When you go out and you do good things for people, the good things come back to you.
Yes.
It's not about knocking on your door and being like, Cyndee, remember that thing? Did you know you owe me no, you just go out and you do good things.
I'm not keeping score.
Right?
Keeping score is just going to drive you nuts.
Drive you nuts. You will literally go nuts. Like,
yes.
I had a great aunt. They didn't talk to me for a year because I didn't send her a thank you card after I graduated. Like, that will drive you crazy.
Oh,
you know, like those little things like that. Like
over a thank you card.
But if you keep score and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like, I didn't even think about it. I was 18, you know, like, I don't know. Like, I didn't.
No, you're 18.
I was 18. Yeah.
Half the time, it's like those send out cards where you could just print it anyways.
It was a big family drama. It was ridiculous, but it's like keeping score and, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely what the enemy would want you to do. I saw so many people in networking oftentimes would focus in on, you know, I've sent them stuff and they've never sent me anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you're harboring the bitterness of it and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't, you know, like, I get you. I understand you're frustrated. But what do you do with that? Like, what's your bounce back? For me, I remember, I think it was someone in Primerica that said, Jerome Cooper, I think, said something to the effect of, what's your bounce back? Is it a day? Is it, you know, an hour? Is it 30 minutes? Like, you have to work yourself back to the point where these arrows can fly at you, and, you know, give it a minute. Okay, you can reflect that there are emotions in it, but if you're going to harbor that, people can sense it. Like, when you go out and network, they're like, what's going on with Susie?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. It's the layers of trauma that you know that you literally bake in and you don't deal with.
Yeah.
And because you focus on, you make it a trauma.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a trauma, but when those voices in your head, when the, you know, when those, what do you call it? The warfare, the
enemy's warfare,
the enemy's
spiritual warfare,
the spiritual warfare, you know, when you're getting that, it's very easy to shrivel.
Yeah. Tell yourself the opposite. I always tell myself, like, if I'm really frustrated by this, which actually ended up happening that day of the SiriusNet breakfast, I was a half hour late. I was like, I have so much work to do. I should just turn my car around and go home. And my friend Cora, she was on the phone with me and she goes, don't you dare do that, because usually what happens is there's something fierce and amazing on the other side of it.
Ooh.
And I was like, you think so? And she's like, heck yeah, girl, you walk in there with confidence that you're 30 minutes late. Well, I wasn't only 30 minutes late. I had an open seat next to Doug.
Right.
Being 30 minutes late.
Yeah.
So I think that if people would take the opposite mindset of, if you're upset with somebody, think that there might be something incredible on the other side of it.
Yes.
You literally never know that there could be something to where that might be your top referral partner that you're getting ready to write off right now.
Yeah. Because we're going through human experiences, you have no idea what somebody else is going through, and you write them off because whatever happened.
Yeah.
Or you go home.
Yep.
The first time I went to a networking event, my boss told me I had to go to this chamber event, and I got there early, and I was like, oh, I'm really early. That's embarrassing. I don't want to be the first person in the parking lot. So I drove around for about 40 minutes until I was late, and then I pulled in the parking lot. I'm like, oh, now I'm late. I can't show it going late, and so I went home.
Did you really?
I did.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I tell that story because people look at me now and they're like, no way. I wouldn't believe that. Like, you're, social and but like those voices they'll get to everybody, right? Like I had all the reasons why I'm going to make a fool of myself showing up for this meeting. And I wasn't strong enough to put my vest on and do it. I went home.
Gosh.
And when you go home, oh my God, what does that do? And when I'm talking about like the layers of trauma,
you just created a layer.
I created a layer of trauma because now I'm a person that is scared of going in. I'm a person that didn't follow through with what I said I'm going to do. Like, think of like the layers of things that we pile on ourselves when you don't follow through with something that you're supposed to do.
Yep. You'd think it's such a little simple thing, but it just adds more layers into your belief system.
Yep.
So that if this happens again, what are you naturally going to do? Oh, I'm not going.
Yeah. Because the I am statements are so powerful, and all of a sudden you become a person that doesn't follow through.
Yep.
I become a person that's not reliable. I become a person that's not, can't do the hard things. And I say that to myself, and not only to myself, but you said you can sense the trauma.
Oh yeah.
From the women or the girls that you meet, and we can see that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's very visible. That kind of reminds me too, or makes me think about how, do you ever get a text message that like really gets you upset and going, right?
Yep.
And you could be reading that text wrong. The tone of it could be coming across non-intentional in a direction. Well, I remember I was on vacation to Florida at the time, and I saw a text message that was like paragraphs, and the individual, I was like, man, this is deep. I don't know if I want to read these paragraphs while on vacation kind of thing, because I read maybe the first sentence and it wasn't seeming to sound very positive.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this person knows I'm on vacation, so I'm not going to respond to it, because I told them they know that I'm not home. And they ended up leaving me a voicemail that I didn't listen to because I protected the vacation time.
Yep.
And I knew it wasn't a fire that I needed to put out, like an emergency or anything. And I get back to, that following week to work, and I read like 2 sentences of the text, and I felt my heart start to go, like anxious, angry, all the feelings. And I knew they left that voice message, and I made a conscious decision that I'm going to call this person. I'm not going to read the rest of the text message. I'm not going to listen to the voicemail. I'm going to have a conversation with them. Well, come to find out, they were really going through the thick of the enemy, attacking them and making them think things and, misunderstandings kind of thing. So I completely cleared the air on everything. And I said, before we even start talking, I says, just so you know, I haven't read the text message you sent other than the first sentence or 2, and I didn't listen to your voicemail. And they're like, okay. So we talked through everything. And I said, okay, now that you know I didn't read the text message and the voicemail, should I delete them? And they're like, please do.
Yeah.
I was actually telling you that I didn't want any relationship with you any longer.
Wow.
And they said, I am so glad you called me, because that eliminated all of the fake garbage that I was hearing from the enemy.
Yep.
And I said, yet the power of picking up the phone and calling somebody is a big deal.
Yeah.
And the power of you not reading the text message or the voicemail because you're like, so something doesn't seem right here.
Yep.
I really hope that people do that more. Pick up the phone.
if you, it feels easier to send those messages back and forth. Like it's because you can just type it up and send it. But man, how much emotion does that stir? How much are you thinking about it? And now it gets deeper and deeper because they're just words and people are filling in the blanks at how you're saying it.
Yeah.
And they're assuming the worst.
Right. Yeah. I feel so bad because the person was hearing all week long a bunch of lies, you know, in their head of they're not worthy, they're not good enough. And I'm like, that is definitely not coming from the God I serve. And that's not coming from me. And it was just so cool to see that outcome where they were like, delete it, don't read it, don't listen to it. And I knew enough of discernment not to have done it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
So then my husband's like, well, can I listen to it and read it? I go, no, it's deleted, you know? And they're like, well, aren't you curious? I'm like, no, I'm not going down that road.
There's no point now.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Before we got on, kind of topic change, but you were talking about Bob Burg. And so I got to know this story and how this all happened. Because again, it's those things on our path, right?
Yes, yes. So I think at the time I was working in financial services, this was like a little over 2 years ago. The book, The Go-Giver, was suggested to me. And I always ask people, I'm like, is this a short read or a long read? I asked Adam Sanwan the same thing. He's like, I love how you intro with that. He's like, it's a short read just for you. But I said, yeah, okay, I'll read it. So I get this book, The Go-Giver. And I could not put the book down. Like, I think I read it in like a day and a half or 2 days, you know, with the stories that are in there. And I'm like, I feel like this is speaking my life, you know, reading this book. And when I started my collective network, I'm like, I wish that every member, like, I think this book is so worthy to get in all the hands of business networking people, even non-business networking people, like just how to have good character and do the right thing. But I thought, man, I would give a portion of the membership money just to pay for these books to put in their hands. And so 2 years go by, I didn't end up buying them in bulk. I did a little bit of research, like, I wonder if I could get a hold of this guy, Bob. Like, this would be awesome. And I just really want to get the book out to people. Well, what is this, a week ago maybe? I get the email from SiriusNet, and it says Bob Burg. I'm like, oh, they're promoting his book. What a coincidence. You know, not thinking any deeper. And then I'm like, what? The guy's speaking? Like, they know Bob? Like a celebrity.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm like, what in the world? Like, how did they get a hold of Bob? And so, in Manesh Boxey, he was the coach for a lot of the teams because I was in Primerica.
Okay.
So, mind you, I see Manesh at the breakfast too. And I'm like, Manesh? He's like, hey. I'm like, what the? I'm like, he was coached to Ian Pruckner. Like, what in the world? This is awesome. So I see it says Manesh Boxey and Bob Burg. I'm like, okay. So Trey recently, who's part of SiriusNet, she comes out to record an advertisement at the podcast studio recently. And I was like, yeah, Trey, I saw Bob Burg. And she's like, oh yeah, are you part of the Alliance or something like that? And I says, don't know what that is. But who can connect me, you know, to just, I don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
With Bob Burg. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm sure I can, you know, get a connection in there. I'm part of that alliance type of thing. But I was like, I would absolutely love to have like people coming in on that. Is it a virtual? I think it is.
Yeah. I just saw that last week. Was that Manesh is having Bob on?
Yeah.
And then you can like Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so good. Like, I would shout this to the moon and back for people to hop on this thing, because that Go-Giver book, man, it'll change your life.
It really will.
It's almost like, I mean, I know B&I says this, givers gain. Really good tagline, because really it's true, tagline. Right? Yeah. That's the Go-Giver, in my opinion, is like, give because you don't know what's going to happen behind the scenes of how this is going to move and impact your life, your business,
Yep.
So, yeah.
There's so many examples of that too. Like we were talking about beforehand, like kind of that spider web of making the connections and making sure you're, but like people always say, what do you get out of that? Or do you have this for people that come into your groups and you kind of know that they're probably not the right people? I think you said that at the very beginning. It's like, what am I getting out of this?
Oh,
like,
yeah. What's in it for me? Like right in.
They're in like 3 weeks and they're like, I haven't gotten a referral yet. So like,
Oh boy. Yeah.
It's a process of relationship, and all they do is show up to the meeting. They don't do the, it's going
but
on
it's not working.
Relationships. It's never working. It's not
This
working.
isn't working.
It's not working. What isn't working exactly? But then like, I think of Michael Mayernick is a good guy. Did you meet Michael?
I don't think so.
Mike is, he owns Mitten Junk. He was at the Sears Nut Breakfast too, but yeah, there's so many people.
Yeah. Maybe he spoke yeah.
Yeah. So super awesome guy, but he has a junk removal company. But his whole passion is connecting with people and connecting other people. And so he's been able this year to grow the company to where he can spend all the time just building relationships.
That's awesome.
Right? And so there was a sector of time where I had like 10 meetings right back to back where people were like, oh my God, this junk guy, Michael, like he just keeps connecting me to people. Like 10 meetings in a row that I had that somebody mentioned Michael Mayernick, because when he was meeting with them, he would be like, oh, you need to meet this person and this person. And then he'd connect them.
He's the connector.
He's the connector. And people are out talking about this guy to other meetings that they're going to. Like, have you ever met Michael Mayernick? This guy's amazing. You got to meet him. And he's connected me to so many people and just, blah.
Yes.
It's like, you're going out there and doing that work. And it's like, we talked about doing good things, and good things will come back for you. That's a perfect example is Mike. He's out there doing good things.
Best marketing you could ever have.
Best marketing you could ever have, because other people are out there talking about how you need to meet this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like free advertising because he authentically did the right thing and started connecting people.
Exactly. And then think about it. Like if you've built that relationship with somebody and then they turn around and say, I really need to meet people that are in the senior home space. Do you know anybody? Yeah, I'm going to connect you to, I know this person, this person, this person. I'll connect you because that person's built so much credibility for you in your relationship.
Yeah, there's so much power in that. Even spending in time in your groups to share what's happening, not just like, oh, I had a great one-to-one, had coffee with so-and-so. That's great, but like, tell me more. Like what happened out of that one-to-one. And it then helps trigger the other people in the group's memory of, oh, so he's focused on veterans. I didn't even know he was a veteran. Oh my gosh, I've got some veteran friends. Like I think there's so much that we can do when we're not only connecting people, but how are we connecting people and telling others of what it is, what their niche is.
Absolutely. By the way, Bob Burg does respond to his messages on LinkedIn. Like if
does
you message him, he'll message you back. Yeah, I connected with them a couple years ago on LinkedIn, and I always, whenever I connect with anybody, I shoot them a message. And so I'm like, I'm going to shoot Bob Burg a message, and he responded back right away.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like it's like a celebrity to me. I'm going to have to definitely reach out to him and tell him, hey, you inspired me from right out the gate. Your book is what I would love to see duplicated all across the world in, giving and actually genuinely. And I call it a discipleship in that book when it talks about how the gentleman took him under his wing and was like, hey, let's share a meal together.
Yeah.
And totally changed that gentleman, his world through it. But I see this, and I talked about this on my podcast as well, as I saw a movie called The Forge recently, still in theaters. And I think the Kendrick brothers put that production together. But it talks about the power of when you bring someone in. And this forge is like a circle of these older gentlemen, and each older gentleman brought in like a younger gentleman. And they discipled them in their faith, in business, in their personal life. And that's what I got out of seeing that Go-Giver. I was like, if we all would take on the behaviors that they talk about in this book and bring other people alongside of us and mentor them, especially like we're in the networking world.
Yeah.
You know, like I would love to see like more mentorship happening in networking so that when people are coming into it, like I was from corporate America, they'd be like, it's good. You're good. Come on out. Come to this event. Come, you know, I'll give you some feedback on your elevator pitch. I'll teach you how to create an elevator pitch. Like, I just think that that's amazing. So
I love that. Like, it's like collective, like an incubator, like you have the different experiences and how people can help you. That's amazing. Because again, I think the biggest thing and what I'm building on my platform too, is that can be a really lonely place. You know, you talked about being a solopreneur and then you quickly said, well, not really because I've got all these people, but really because you have to go and be the one who goes and does it, you know, but this doesn't have to be a lonely thing. In fact, if it's lonely for you, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. You know, and you're looking at those relationships and bringing people in, that's where all the magic happens.
Yeah. In community. Yeah. It's, I remember this one part where they, in the movie, all these men, they get together for dinner every 2 weeks. And he had the younger gentleman hold a 10-pound sword straight with his arms locked for an extended period of time. And his arms started to shake after a while, you know, from the weight. And then he said, now, gentlemen, I want you to step in right now and put 2 fingers on the sword or whatever to help hold up the sword. And he says, how do you feel holding that sword now? And he goes, oh my gosh, such a relief. And he says, God never meant for you to do this alone. The sword, which represented the word of God in this movie, but he says, there is power in community. And if we would all step in together and really support one another personally and professionally, how much different would the world be?
Wow. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's that abundance mentality too, because I think, you know, we make decisions based off of 2 core things. It's like fear or love, right? And it's that fear of if they're successful, then how am I going to be, you know, looking at, you know, and I love the how you're bringing in, what did you call it? The collective or, synergy circles.
Oh yeah.
The synergy circles, because a lot of times people look at, oh, that's my competitor, you know, oh, I'm competing against them. I've got to beat them, or I've got to, you know, whatever. But when you build relationships with even people that are doing the same exact thing as you, it opens up so many doors, because one, I'm not a fit for everybody. Yeah. And so it's been so awesome to have that Rolodex of relationships of people that's like, I'm not your person, but have you met this guy? Yeah. You know, and I just recently, right after the breakfast, actually, there was somebody that was at the breakfast that had a session, a time scheduled with me. And because he reached out and said, I want to know more about your business coaching. Right. Yeah. And so we had a conversation, and as he's talking about what he's doing, I'm like, I don't think I'm your guy. Have you met Kevin Sabowski? And he was like, no. And I'm like, I think you're really at that stage of really trying to figure out what you have here and putting your business plan together and really understanding, are you lit about this? Is this something, or we're, and then he confided in me that there's this whole other business that and when he started talking about that, he was so lit up about it. But the thing he was talking about before wasn't. And so I was able to connect him with Kevin, and then he signed up for Kevin's program. And so it's just really, really cool how that happens. Yeah. It takes building relationships and being okay with somebody that does something very, very similar to you.
Yeah. And it stands out because if you think of when you take that step in a relationship and send a referral, that person that works in a similar industry now is changing their perspective on networking with people that are in the same industry. Yeah. And I remember Peter Winnie, who is an EOS implementer, and as well as Kevin Sabowski. But I remember Peter telling me and someone else, I'm not necessarily for you because you're a solopreneur, but Kevin Sabowski's like, I work with solopreneurs. Yep. And so you as a person think even more highly of like Peter Winnie for doing that. Like, I'm like, oh, like you could have potentially had that, but you have that mindset, right, of doing what's best for the client.
Yep.
I think if we all start thinking that way, man, we'd shift the culture out there.
And it comes back because, again, there's so many times that I've connected somebody with somebody else, and then that person's thought of me for someone else, or the person that I've referred them to has thought of me, or it just builds an authentic relationship.
Yeah.
That I'm not just here for the money or whatever the thing that you can give me,
Yeah.
It's about your well-being.
Yeah. And I know that not everyone's willing to think differently, but I refuse to stop voicing the power of it.
Yep.
Like it doesn't mean everyone's going to adopt my perspective on it, but I can voice it and say, hey, there's a better way of doing this. And I love to, like, we had a financial, when we met for the financial group, there were 2 insurance agents in there. And they were going to town with, like, giving each other tips and tricks. And you could tell, like, they were taking notes.
Yeah.
And they voice, like, the power of working with other people, even in insurance, that they were finding along the way. So every time we kick off synergy circles, I always have somebody sharing how they synergistically worked with someone that's in the same industry, and what the results were. So I can set the tone for the meeting.
That. It's setting that example.
Yeah.
And it's showing it because people need that story or that example. They need to see it in order to shift their mindset because we're raised in, like, a cynical world. Their parents told them not to trust other people,
Right.
Like, you think about that. Don't share with them. They'll steal your idea. They'll take it. And I remember I had a mentor that changed my life. He was like, because I just watched him share all of his secrets, right? He was so successful in what he was doing, and he would tell everybody that was in the industry what he was doing. And I would say, why do you do that? And he was like, well, one, they probably won't do it.
There's truth in that.
Like, one, he was like, they have good intentions, but he was like, they're probably not going to do it. And 2, if they do, like, they think of me, and it comes down to it, and they're able to help themselves. And he grew a successful consulting business out of it. But it's one of those things, like, you go and share, you go and help people.
Yeah. It's not meant for you to feel like you have to, like, protect everything because someone's going to steal it. Because what if someone does steal it? You going to drive yourself nuts over it?
Absolutely.
Like, it's not even worth it.
What do you do?
You're like, take it as I remember we did a lot of speed networking. 2 years ago, we started doing it. And it wasn't trendy back then. But I was like, man, I just love the speed networking, quick connections. And Colleen Buddy ended up taking it to Office Evolution Troy and doing it once a month there. And people were like, do you know that Colleen Buddy went and took what you're doing and put it at Office Evolution? I'm like, yeah, it's sweet. I'm like, what a compliment, right? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's a compliment.
Yeah.
It's only helping you as a business professional. You have more opportunities. I'm not going to fit in everyone's schedule to come to my business networking events. So go to theirs.
Absolutely. And it comes all the things that you talked about, like all the things that have happened when you connect with other people doing the things. One, we both have podcasts, right? And so that's one of the things that we've connected on. But, like, I had the coffee because I had Dylan in England on the podcast he does a podcast. And when we were sitting here talking in this studio, he was like, we were talking about ways to monetize the podcast. And he was like, oh, this, I got to have reach out to this person to roast coffee, and started telling me the whole story. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing. That's awesome. And he's like, take it. Like, I'm like, I can't believe I have a podcast called Coffee and Grit. I didn't think about branding a coffee. I'm like, geez, man, Dylan, that's genius. And he's like, dude, take it. And honestly, it would have just died. But Grant, this guy Grant, that was my engineer, and he'd always come into the episode, and he voiced in, and he was like, dude, you should do it. You should call it Lion's Breath. And I'm like, that's genius.
It is.
So I ran with it. And
the name of the company, when you told me, I was like, Shadrach, Meshach, what?
And a bean to go.
A bean to go?
Isn't that awesome?
I think I saw that again, unless someone else has coffee, after I knew that you had yours.
Yeah.
I saw that coffee name come up again.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
So they have 2 locations. One is in Lake Orion, and the other one is in Goodrich, which is where the one I go to.
Lake Orion, I think probably was it where I saw it.
It's the best coffee ever, the best people ever. I used to just, when you get energy when you go to a certain place, it was like just you walk in, it's just so wholesome and everything. So that's the way it always was. And then when we went out there to set up the deal to do the coffee back in January, me and Gracie went in and they had moved to a new location. So since the last time I had been out there, they moved to this new building and it's just beautiful. And we walk in and just, again, the vibe. But these two guys in their mid-20s come out from the back room where the coffee roasting was at. And they're just having this conversation. And like, it was just, you could see the love. Yeah. And then the young man literally says, "All right, I love you. You have a great day." And then he was like, looked over at the counter and there's this barista working that apparently just got back from school. And he's like, "Oh my God, Michelle, you're here. That's so awesome. I love you. Great seeing you." And it's just to see.
Oh, what a culture.
To see that culture.
Yeah. Is it a coffee shop?
It's a coffee shop. And they're the roasters. And so they roast the coffee and it's just a superior roast. It's never burned. It's like amazing coffee. But again, it's you can go into this coffee shop and you'll see exactly what I mean.
Wow. I need to like get a tour of that place.
I've never been to the Lake Orion one, but I'm sure it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it's been awesome.
Lion's breath. I still thought it was crazy too. I had to say, when we first met, which wasn't when we were intended to meet.
Yes. Yeah.
Showing up and getting branded photos done at the Unplugged event. You and your wife were there and you were getting your pictures done right before me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, now I look back, I'm like, you guys were holding your coffee mug that I didn't know was filled with this coffee brand. And you were the guy that Adam introduced me to.
Isn't that crazy? I
love
those. I love those stories.
Yeah.
Speaking of God winks, we got to talk about your podcast before we wrap up.
Wink, wink. Yeah. So, started the podcast in December, this past December. I think we're just crossing 27 episodes, and I did not intend on hosting a podcast. For like a year at least, God was really showing me that, hey, get on the mic and talk about stories, God's stories, because there's a lot of negative press and news in general. Like, why not have something for people to listen to that's inspiring, motivating, positive, and about the Lord? And I'm like, Lord, I just launched 2 business networking companies. I don't know a thing about podcasting. I have no equipment. The aesthetics of my home office is terrible. I have high ceilings. It sounds like a big echo. So I, like any weird person, I'm like, okay, Lord, it's going to have to check this box, and this box if I were to enter into this. And God just laughs at us, right? And I was just, I said, there's got to be a studio that won't cost me money because I don't have the money to finance that. And equipment already there, and someone who's going to run the equipment and edit the podcast, because I don't know how to do it, and I really don't want to have to spend time in that area. So within that prayer, within a week, 2 weeks, Colleen comes to me and she's like, "Hey, you ever consider, hosting a podcast?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, you should use our beautiful studio we just created." I'm like, "What?" She's like, yeah. You got a good following. She's like, just plug Office Evolution in it. And I'm like, you're getting used by the Lord? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
You're getting used by the Lord right now?
I guess everyone's get used by the Lord. I don't know.
You're just a vehicle right now. So
I know. I'm like, didn't need to make this weird, Colleen, but yeah. I didn't mean to make this weird. So then a friend of mine, she's like, "Hey, you'd be great to like host podcasting." And I, we can edit it for you. You just need to market our publications company. I'm like, you're getting used by the Lord right now. She's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, I just told him that I don't have the equipment. I don't have the studio. I don't have anything. I don't know how to do anything. And she's like, well, we're doing this. And I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, I felt like didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I jumped in the water and I'm just like, okay, let's just get on the mic. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but that's okay because if we had never done nothing at all, how would,
Absolutely.
how are you going to move things for the good? So yeah, it's been amazing having people get on and share how God divinely showed up in their life. And now I'm to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really not that hard to press record on the Rodecaster. You know what I mean? I do have to say I have one time where I thought I was recording and I wasn't.
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst. If you only have one, good for you.
I know. I awkwardly looked at the Rodecaster and then poor Sarah Krieger, who I was interviewing, she goes, and she's a podcaster. She goes, oh no.
No.
Are we not recording? And I saved that thing as a blooper to put into
That's
it.
phenomenal.
But I feel like all you can do is just laugh about it. And it actually makes you more authentic than you realize, because then people are like, I've been afraid to start a podcast. And now what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Like, just go for it. And so, yeah, we've now I know how to record on my own. Trey, is it
Trey Bolin. Yeah.
So I was jumping in the deep last week and I'm like, listen, Trey, I've never recorded a commercial before. I ain't got a clue what I'm doing, but we're going to do this. And she's like, let's do it. And so she says, you are more prepared than you realize. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. So I put, a teleprompter on CapCut for her. We did a little bit of work, ChatGPT, went on her website, and bing, bang, boom, in 15 minutes, you're going to hear this Thursday an amazing marketing ad for Trey. I'm like, we did it. And she's like, we did it. I'm like, now I'm excited to move forward because I have now a confidence that we can do this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that encourages your listeners or not, but man, just go for it.
Go for it. And I love how this, again, it ties into that kind of collaboration. Because at the Serious Net Breakfast, I had talked about my podcast, and then Trey was one of the next tables over. And you could see just the wind was taken out of her sails. She was like, oh, I have a podcast too. And when it got back to me, I was like, listen, just be on Trey's podcast. You have in this room a wealth of content that you should take advantage of. You know, be on everybody's podcast because they have different audiences. They have different, the more content you can create, oh my God, the value of this content is incredible. So the more you can do that, go do it. And then you form more relationships too. Because this is the trick for me to be able to build better relationships, right?
It is.
It started off like that. You have a cool story. I want to know more about you. Let's have you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's we were doing these coffee things together all the time. Why aren't we turning it into a podcast?
Absolutely.
And getting it out to more people for people's stories. And I remember Adam specifically told me, you need to go to this event because there's going to be a lot of podcasters in there. And I was like, oh, really? Because I'm like, this is new for me. I'm the rookie. I started in December. He's like, yeah, you want to be in the room.
Yeah.
And then knowing now, Jason, how much you've inspired as these people were saying, I was on Coffee and Grit. I was on Coffee and Grit. You inspired these people to have a voice.
I had to go talk after he had people stand up, and it was really emotional. Seeing, that was really, really cool. Visually seeing, and then thinking about the individual stories, thinking about Jen McClure sitting here and then leaving and going and writing her book.
Yep.
And now writing her second book, and just, you talk about that, the inspiration of being able to help people share their voice.
Yes. It's that ripple effect.
I love how that meant the line that it got interpreted to you, because that's the whole platform is uncaging your roar, because there's so many people trapped in their head. I was there.
Yep.
In different variations.
Yep.
In my early 20s, I wouldn't have, I was super afraid of everything. In later on, I was afraid of starting my business, Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's definitely, I like how you said uncaging. It's really uncaging people. And that's why I think we come up against, this resistance because somebody on the other side knew we were going to create a ripple.
Absolutely.
That was going to get people to, the right people to get on the mic or publish their book or start a blog and not listen to that other voice.
I've been on this mission, and I kind of said this is like during 2020, like COVID's all going down, and you saw, if you looked for it, it was very easy to find a lot of just evilness, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, like families breaking up,
Yep.
friends unfriending each other, like just all this chaos of people living in the uncertainty and kind of just, getting trapped. And I said, there's going to be a lot of people that were in the top of the game that are going to disappear. But I look at this time right now as this is the time for all the difference makers to unite.
Yep.
For all the people that are the light, for them to rise up and not just one of them, right? We all work together.
Yes.
Like we all bring this web together because it's not just one. There's been individual people trying to make it happen for a while. What if we all work together?
Yes. It would be this is the discipleship. This is the forge. It's get united. I keep on hearing this power in unity. Like get united because you're the army.
Yeah.
That you're going to represent and be a light to these people that I've called on them, but they need you to extend your arm, right, and help hold the sword. So it's like big things I can see that he's doing. He's building an army. I was so shook up that day of the breakfast. I walked in with Pastor Winston and Dawn Wisman, and my eyes were all welled up with tears. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I'm like, "These are tears of joy." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, tell us all about it." I'm like, God's building an army of people. And they're like, "Yeah, amen, he is." And I'm like, "No, do you see it?" I'm like, "I'm serious." I'm like, he's showing me an army that he's building. And when I had coffee with Doug, we were just so inspired. Like, he's like, God's doing some big things. Amen. This is so good. And I just walked away going, I'm so glad I'm a part of something like this. Like I can't wait to see people walking in what their purpose was and reaching more people during these dark times.
It reminds me of this quote that I've heard recently that I can't get out of my head is, hell on earth is meeting the person that you should have been.
That gives me chills.
Right?
Wow.
And that's the message for everybody listening is think about that. Like, because the fear, the devil, all the things hold us back. They separate us. They tell us if we're divided, like all those things. But like, who could you really be? If you threw all that away and you just did it. Yeah.
I don't ever want to die saying, like, I wish I would have, And still, like, I'm going to say to the day I die is to go through the amount of blessing I've gotten that is non-materialistic, non-financial, could never be replaced with the money or the things.
5,000%. Yep.
I'm like, it's incredible. I don't know how people go on without having that, like having their faith, especially when you're going out in business, starting your own business. It's like, there's so many mental battles that you go through that it's like, how could you not get faith in the process? So,
yeah. That's absolutely it. Cyndee, this has been so phenomenal, and I think we could go for another 2 hours. But this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for making that long drive, coming over here, spending the day in such a stylish shirt.
Oh, yeah. My favorite.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.